This is a video of me making a portfolio page for myself completely from scratch. To start off with, I'm going to go to my computer's desktop and then I'm going to make a folder in which I can put my site. So I'm just going to call it portfolio. And then I'll change directory into that. And then the very first thing I'm going to do, and the very first thing I'll do whenever I start a new project, is I'll type Git Init. And that init, as you can probably tell, stands for initialize. So this is telling Git to start watching this folder for any changes I make to files. It's not going to record all of those changes and everything unless I tell it to, but this is just setting it up so I can start doing that down the road. The other thing I'm going to do, since this is a web page, is I'm going to create an index.html. Before I get into that, just notice that when you do git init, all it really does is it creates this .git folder. You should never, ever, ever have any reason to do anything inside that .git folder. In fact, if I were you, I would just completely pretend as if it doesn't even exist. Just ignore it. If you go playing around in the .git folder, it might screw some things up for you, so I would just completely leave it alone. All right, so I'm going to create this index.html, and then I'm going to put some boilerplate HTML inside it. So what I'm writing now is the HTML that you're going to need to start off with for virtually every web page you ever make. Let's see, I'll call this Robert, aka Robin, and then I'll add the body. All right, so you can tell that everything is wrapped inside these HTML tags, which means everything inside here is HTML, pretty straightforward. This doctype, this is necessary because HTML is actually a subset of a different language called XML. And so this tells the browser, hey, this isn't XML, this is HTML. You don't really need to worry about this thing too much. Just know that it's going to be the first line on every web page you ever create. The weird thing about it that kind of bothers me is that you don't need to close it the way you would every other HTML tag. It just sort of hangs out up here. That's all we're going to do with it. A web page is separated into two body parts, if you will, the head and the body. The body is where everything interesting happens, and that's what we're going to be dealing mostly with. As we get further along, I'll differentiate more between the two. So I'm just going to create a piece of text in here that says something like Robert, aka Robin Thomas. All right, good enough. Now I'm going to make sure I can see this thing in my web browser. So I'm going to open up the desktop on my computer, and there's that portfolio folder that I made. And now to view my website, I'm just going to drag and drop this onto Chrome. First, let me make sure Chrome is open. Let's see. There it is. Okay, and now I'm just going to drag and drop this onto the Chrome icon, and there is my fantastic web page. All right, so this is a pretty good start. Well, it's a modest start, but still pretty good. I'm going to make a commit, the very first commit for my Git repository. So I'm going to type two things. I'm going to type git add index.html. That's a file I made. Git add is telling Git, hey, I want to save a snapshot of this particular file. And so when I say a snapshot, I mean it's kind of like how when you go and watch a cartoon movie, that cartoon movie really is just a whole bunch of snapshots of different things that people have drawn. Then you take all those snapshots and put them in order, and that gives you a movie. With Git, it's sort of the same idea. You take snapshots of files at different points in time. And the nice thing about that is if you decide you don't really like the work that you've been doing, you can go back to an earlier snapshot. You can basically throw away some of these snapshots and go back to an earlier one. And it's not actually a snapshot. It's not actually just a picture that sits there. You can actually go back to the file itself earlier in time. So you can go back to old versions of your work. This keeps you from doing things like index.html, and then you would have like, I don't know, index use this.html, and then you might have, oh, like index really use this.html. I remember doing that all the time when writing essays in college, and using Git means you don't need to do that. All right, so I'm going to do git add index.html. That's telling Git I want this file to be included in the snapshot I'm about to take. Now I'm going to actually take that snapshot with git commit. So I'm going to type git commit -m, that stands for message, and I'll say initial commit created index.html. So that -m, that message, every one of these snapshots, every one of these commits you make can have a message associated with it that tells you or whoever else might be looking at your series of snapshots, your series of commits, what each one did. And so that distinction that'll be a bit more important later on. I'll show you how that works when we have more commits. But that's my very first commit. So I've created this repository, I've made my first snapshot, I've made my first file, and now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get it on GitHub. So I'm gonna go to github.com, and then while that's coming up, I'm going to click create, let's see, new repository. That's what I want. Okay, and I'm going to call this repository Robert, aka Robin, that's my GitHub username, .github.io. All right, so you can see I actually already have a repository named this, so I'm just going to delete it really quick. Let's see. So that'll be at Robert, aka Robin.github.io. While this is pulling up, let me explain why your repository has to be called this. It has to be called that if you're going to publish this web page on GitHub itself. So GitHub's really nice. It gives you a free place to save a web page and publish it so anyone else in the world can see it. The one condition for it really is that you have to call the repository into which you're going to put your web page your GitHub username .github.io. So it has to be your GitHub username. It's not case sensitive, as you can see, but it has to be your GitHub username. All right, so I'll bet if I type this again, now it should say that I'm all good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and create that. All right, now I'm going to click this little clipboard to copy this link right here. All these instructions down here, I'm going to ignore that because I know what I'm doing. All right, so now I'm going to go back to terminal and I'm going to say git remote add origin. And then I'm going to paste what I just copied. So remote, that means, well, what I have here on my computer is called a local repository. It's not sharing all these snapshots, all these commits I'm making with anyone else. All these files only exist on my computer. If I want to be able to share these files with someone else, then I need to create a remote repository. It's called a remote repository because it's really just taking my local repository, what I have on my computer, and putting it on someone else's computer, another computer where other people can access it. That other computer in this case is GitHub's own servers. So it's called remote because it's remote from my computer. It's somewhere else. So what I've done here is I've said I'm going to add this new remote and I'm going to call it origin. So you can have multiple remotes if you wanted to store this on multiple different computers. Most of the time you're just going to have one and you're going to call it origin. That's just sort of standard convention to call it origin. So this is telling my local repository, hey, I'm going to be taking all these commits that I've made to you and I'm going to be putting them on this other computer. To actually put them on the other computer, I'm going to type git push and then the name of my remote. So what I've nicknamed this other computer that I'm going to put them on. In this case, I've called it origin. I'm going to say git push origin and then master. Master is the branch that I'm on right now. I'll talk more about branching later on. But if I'm getting this message, then that looks like it did everything correctly. And if I refresh this page, now we can see that index.html that I created is right here. So this is going to be the process for every file that I create here. Excuse me, I'm going to create a file, or I'm going to make some changes to an existing file. I'm going to type git add, git commit, and then git push origin master. You only need to do the git remote add origin thing. You only need to do this once, and that's just to link it up in the first place. From there on out, I can just do git push origin master. So now I'm set up and now I'm ready to actually start making this site. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this video and then we'll pick up with the next one.